This episode contains spoilers for The Wolf Among Us and the Fables comic book series.
Welcome to the Push to Smart Water Cooler. Stacey and I are going to have a little chat about the first episode of TellTale's latest episodic adventure game, The Wolf Among Us. The Wolf Among Us is based on the long-running comic series by Bill Willingham and serves as a prequel set about 20 years before the events of issue number 1.
The first episode of The Wolf Among Us, Faith, puts us in the shoes of Fabletown's sheriff, Bigby Wolf. After he is first called in for a domestic violence dispute, things take a turn for the worse when the victim's head shows up on Bigby's doorstep the next morning. This turns the game into a full-blown murder investigation, and Bigby and Snow White are on the case. Unfortunately, it takes an even darker turn when the killer appears to claim Snow White as his next victim. So, what was your familiarity going in?
Well, I haven't read that much. I think I've read the first, I want to say, 30 some odd issues of the series.
Okay.
And I know you've read more, so.
Yeah, though I don't really, I've read, the deluxe volumes, which are the big, library volumes they put out. So I don't really have any concept of what issues go where. Or, and I don't know anything about, the side stories. But fortunately, because Bigby and Snow White are major characters... Oh, that's a spoiler. But yeah, Snow White's not dead. Since Bigby and Snow White are major characters in it, I had an idea of kind of what was going on in the story and how I wanted it to unfold.
Since you've read so much of the comics, how did that, change how you, played or how you felt about the game?
It did affect it a lot more than I thought it was going to. Because, like everybody else, I played The Walking Dead right before this, and I found that in The Walking Dead, it was more like shaping Lee's character and seeing how to keep the group together, whereas when I approached this game, it was much more, okay, what will Bigby do here? Knowing how events turn out for him, what would be the most narrative satisfying thing for me to do here for Bigby, which was a really interesting, very different experience than anything else I've played. Did you find that at all, even with the first 30?
Yeah, well, I felt like it's kind of interesting because you're kind of trying to make, decisions so that his character is cohesive and makes sense. Not like what you would do, like you said with Lee, since he's just kind of a blank canvas. You do whatever you feel like you should be doing or what you want to do. But when it came to Bigby, I was like, okay, so knowing where he is and where he's going, he would probably choose this. Or he would say that. He wouldn't be that much of a jerk, but he'd still be this much of a jerk. So that definitely colored my playthrough. But I don't think it really took away anything.
Yeah.
Even though I felt more compelled to choose certain options, not based on my personal experience, I still really enjoyed it.
Even though there are some choices that I really struggled with, okay, which one's going to work the best? I think they did a really good job making sure most of the choices did fit. Mm-hmm. And so there wasn't a point where, he was going in a complete opposite direction that made no sense. You could tell they really understood his character.
Exactly.
Yeah, that kind of makes you think of one character that I wonder if they actually got right, which was Snow White.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know you brought that up in another conversation we had earlier. And the idea that Snow White in the game is very different than the Snow White we first meet in the comic books.
Yeah, Snow White in the comic books is definitely more kind of independent, and she's a bit more kind of wide-eyed and innocent in the game. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if this is the turning point in her character where that makes her kind of the more wary, no-nonsense person that we meet in issue 1 of the series. Yeah,
I almost wondered if it was a pseudo-retcon type thing, because... Mm-hmm. I'm not sure exactly where issue 30 lands, but later in the series, obviously, she and Bigby do get married, and and have kids. Not exactly in that order, but once they do become married, she becomes much more kind of subservient. She looks to Bigby more. She doesn't really have a lot of adventures on her own, and I was almost thinking that maybe they chose to make her that way in the comic books, less because they were going to make her become this kind of hardened badass that she is in the beginning of the comics, or if it's more okay, mm-hmm. Well, people that read the comics know her as this now. This is what we're going to make her in the game.
That's kind of disappointing.
Though this is only issue 1 or episode 1.
I mean, I'm sure that if my head were cut off, I'd be pretty pissed. So I'm hoping that she does kind of turn into that bit more of a badass, bit more of just a bit more of a kind of rounded character.
Right.
But to talk about something that I did like that isn't character related is the art style and art direction of the game, which is just breathtaking. And that intro sequence is just to die for. I mean, just a feast for your eyes. Just love it. It
sets the tone for everything.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful sequence. And it's interesting because it doesn't try to emulate the comic books, but at the same time, it totally fits.
And it's set in the 80s, so it kind of has that kind of neon lighting, but also it's noir, and just it's a really great combination of the two. So
because one of the things about the comics is that it switches not only art styles but like different genres, especially in the first few stories. Like the first story in the game, or in the comics rather, is a murder mystery. So it's really great seeing them kind of go straight for those big genre cues and that image and that music. It just works really well.
And it makes me wonder if this game is going to follow suit. If the murder is going to be wrapped up, and then we're going to go into the more political side of the fables.
That's a cool idea. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm hoping. Of course, they're probably going to make multiple seasons because it's been pretty successful. So
it's working out for The Walking Dead, so why not?
Yeah.
So maybe this is a good time to talk about like the big decisions that you had to make, because I don't know if they ever did this before The Walking Dead, but they always, at the end of an episode, they'll list out the decisions that you had to make and then give a percentage as to how many other players had the same experience you did or chose the same thing you did. So did you choose to give the money to Faith?
I did, just because I was like, why the hell not?
Yeah.
I mean...
Well, it seemed like, I did it too, and it seemed like a very Big B thing to do, because even though he is, the big bad wolf, he does kind of have that heart of gold.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's gonna try to do the right thing.
But one thing that I do applaud it for is, I thought that was going to be such a small gesture. I didn't think that it was going to be brought up later in the game with, if you give the money to Faith, you can't pay at the bar. And so that was, I don't know, that was just very cool and very... It's such a small detail, but it's really the detail that makes it.
Yeah, it reinforces that continuity. Which, that was another thing, because I was sure he'd give the money to Faith, but then when he didn't have the money at the bar, I felt so bad. But then when I did my second playthrough, I was like, okay, I'm going to do all the different choices, and I couldn't bring myself to not give the money to Faith. Because I still didn't have money for the bar. And there's another decision that it looks like they're setting up to pay off later, but so far we really don't know anything about it, which is you have Beauty and Beast. Beauty asks you to lie, and then you have the chance to actually tell Beast the truth that she's sneaking out, even though we don't know what she's doing. So did you tell Beast the truth?
I did not. I kept it... I there was a third option that was kind of like, I'm staying out of this, something to that effect that he said. So I'm pretty sure I said I hadn't seen her, but if I had to make the choice again, I probably would have gone with the kind of not choosing sides, don't bring me into this kind of option.
Oh, I wonder if, was that tallied into the percentages? Like, was that included as like not telling the Beast the truth then?
I think probably. I don't know.
Because this is one decision that I had trouble with, trying to figure out what would be the best for Big B. Because I told Beauty I'd keep the secret, and then I did. But I thought, after I saw that, I thought, well, maybe the better decision would have been to tell Beauty that I couldn't keep the secret, and then to tell Beast that I didn't know what was going on. So that kind of Big B would then have all the cards to figure it out as part of his investigation. Because he always seems to kind of be one step ahead of everybody.
Now that's taking role-playing, I think, to a completely different level. I mean, that would be very interesting.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that kind of combination of decisions would have an impact like that.
Right.
I don't know.
Because usually in these games, it doesn't actually, like, it always... Mass Effect is like the analogy that I always come to, but like decisions in Mass Effect don't really matter. I mean, they do. I feel like they do emotionally, but as far as like when you're playing your game, for the most part, unless you choose something really evil, for the most part, you're just going to go right back to the same place.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of faith necessarily that would pay off that. It would be that nuanced, I suppose. But it meant a lot, again, kind of like emotionally, and in my kind of role playing as Big B. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see how they do that.
So when it came to choosing between checking out the prince or helping Toad and his family, which did you do?
I chose to go with Toad because it looked like the prince was already pretty dead. And it seemed like Toad really needed help.
Yeah, it sounded very urgent.
Yeah, but then at the same time, I didn't even realize anything could like you could save Prince Lawrence.
Yeah, I did not even think that was an option until there was the choice at the end, like the little counter of how many people saved them.
Yeah.
And not many people did, for the record.
Yeah, I did that in my second playthrough, and I felt like that was almost a little bit more narratively satisfying as far as being able to talk to the prince and get a little bit more out of that character. But at the same time, it's also like it didn't feel right to leave Toad when we saw that the prince was pretty dead. You know?
Yeah.
Because the characters wouldn't have that knowledge.
Exactly. That kind of forethought. Like, I feel like Bigby would go towards the more urgent of the two choices. So yeah.
That was another one that was interesting because it totally changes your reading of the game too, having Prince Lawrence alive. Because if he's dead, it like ruled him out as a suspect for me. Because I was like, well, there's no way the game could go any further with him dead if he's the killer. But then
an episodic game in one chapter.
Yeah, exactly. But then it was like, oh, well, he couldn't be alive. Maybe he could still be a suspect. So that was really interesting to me. I don't know if it's going to actually go anywhere, but that seemed to step up from the ways that The Walking Dead was divergent.
And so this choice wasn't tracked, but did you rip off the arm?
Oh, the guy at the bar. I did not.
Yeah, neither did I. That was just, that felt like overkill.
Yeah, that was the one choice where it felt like there was one clear one that was wrong for the character. Like, usually they make it, like, as we kind of discussed earlier, so everything feels like it could be justified for Bigby. That one just felt wrong. It was too much. Because there was no real motivation besides just spite. Though, I think the last choice, then, that they do track is the prime suspect. Which, obviously, I wrote off Prince Lawrence. Since I got him killed. So who was your suspect?
Okay, so I would have chosen Bluebeard.
That's what I chose.
But I accidentally hit the wrong button and didn't say anything at all.
Well, that could be interesting because that's still
maybe it was just Bigby holding the cards all along.
Exactly, just like with Beauty and Beast. That was another one though where I might have taken my role play to extreme because I chose Bluebeard not because I thought he was actually the killer, but because I thought Bigby would think he was the killer.
Back to that old chestnut.
Yeah, because in obviously the first kind of arc of the comics, there's this murder that's very like kind of similar. Bluebeard's the prime suspect, and so it's like, okay, Bigby's always after Bluebeard. He knows something's wrong with this guy. He'd totally, and this was his MO with like the beheading, so he'd totally go for Bluebeard. But it's too obvious for us. For, 5 episodes.
It's kind of like, it's very obviously misdirection in a way. So what do you think, we've kind of touched on this, so where do you think the next 4 chapters are going?
I have no idea. I think obviously beauty ties into this somehow. I have no idea how. I read, I think it was on Tumblr, someone had the suspicion that Rose Red would show up and be involved. Since she since she staged the murder in the first issue of the comics, which would be great because she has so much to do with Snow White, and maybe that'll explain why Snow White is acting so differently here than she does in that first arc. But I really have no idea who did what.
I think this is definitely going to be a very kind of like Bigby is kind of going through his anger phase, and it's just going to ramp up until like. In the end, Snow White comes back. Right. And then he's calm.
She's effectively been fridged. which
yes. Oh, absolutely.
which is
But she's going to be defrosted, so I'm not sure if that makes it any better.
I don't think it does. I mean, but yeah, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. She will defrost. Which that totally reminds me. We decided Bluebeard was a suspect, but one of the big decisions at the end of the game is whether or not you're going to chase, I don't know if it was Tweedledee or Tweedledum or the Woodsman.
Oh, I definitely chased Tweedledee and Tweedledum because after the bar scene, I just felt bad for the Woodsman.
I know. I felt that way too, but then on my second playthrough, I chased him just to have something different. And I was surprised in like the next time on the Wolf Among Us segment, he seemed to know all kinds of things I didn't think he would know. So that also makes me wonder if the Tweedle brothers are like another misdirection. But I clearly have no idea what's going on. But I'm really looking forward to it.
So that does it for our water cooler discussion. If you have thoughts or opinions about The Wolf Among Us, where you think it might go, or what decisions you chose, definitely put them in the comments, get a little discussion going, and also check back next time when we're going to discuss BioShock Infinite's latest DLC, Burial at Sea.
Come on, you're scaring the lady.
Don't worry about me.